With the rumors of a Fire Emblem 4 remake, I'm here today to try to tell you why, if I'm IS, I am remaking Fire Emblem 4 and Fire Emblem 5 together. Initially, we have to look at the fact that Fire Emblem trends have been going downwards since the start of Engage, meaning that right now it's at the lowest it's ever been. A remake is always a hard point to reset the series, given that it's a rehashing of an old game. It's not usually a better selling than just a new game. But what if you could turn it around by actually remaking two games at once, combining the best attributes of both games and removing the ones that didn't work? We need to recognize that some of the mechanics from Genealogy and Thracia 776 are outdated. Gone are the days of a walking simulator, horrible item system management, and underperforming foot units from FE4, along with the limited caps which create the same unit feel and inability to control map start positions from FE5. Even bigger, how do you combine these two fundamentally different mechanics and groups of units into one cohesive game? Luckily, the answer has already been provided before. Not exactly, and it wasn't the best execution then, but it can be now if it's done properly. The easiest way to fix this would be to implement Radiant Dawn segmenting arcs. This is something that can be immediately translated into an FE4 remake. With Generation 1 focusing on the tale of Sigurd, along with the child pairing system, there is a capability to create something remarkable. If in most of the chapters of FE4 there was an open map type that focused on Cavaliers with Sigurd and a kind of a tactical mission approach that focused more on Lewin's perspective, there's a balance that can be struck for this type of gameplay. The truth is, the gameplay of FE4 needs to be more streamlined, more engaged, and more dynamic than simply moving your horses around for 15 turns, trying to trade items at one location that you have to return to. By upgrading to this system of having two different types of maps or two different segments, you would basically have Sigurd using his Cavaliers to strike bigger open maps, and you'd have Lewin attacking the smaller maps. Now, this does require Lewin to receive a substantial upgrade to either the story or how he's implemented in it. But I honestly don't think that that's a bad idea given his overall importance to Generation 2 and how important he really is to Generation 1 as well. This also ties really well into Thracia 776 because of Ced's implications within that story. With the end of Generation 1 and the appearance of Leif and Seliph as the main characters, it's even easier to transition into this tactics open map style system in which Leif would be the one managing the tactical aspects and Seliph the more open maps. This can also translate to FE5 maps versus FE4 maps, in which their characterizations can be held to somewhat the same degree without having to significantly alter some of the aspects of them. You could have the best of both worlds with larger open maps using cavalry units and smaller maps focusing on the foot units. Much how like Radiant Dawn controls which units you have access to, this system would be implemented in order for you to utilize your resources correctly in order to beat the game. Now, this is one suggestion. There's another suggestion that's actually a lot easier. Allow everybody to get a horse. If the map is an outside map, just let everybody be able to use a horse. And then, for the inside maps, everybody can dismount. Both of these allow for a system in which indoor maps would allow dismounts, much like FE5 anyway, and for every open map, everybody just automatically has access to a horse. Maybe even a transition between mounted into dismounted units for certain segments of the story and gameplay maps would allow for a ton of cool and different mechanics that would be utilized. For story, it's a little bit more of a simple transition. Some people like to say, but they're completely different and they're non-canon and not paired together or whatever. Honestly, let's just bite the bullet here and canonize some of the events involving Ced and Lewin, which honestly resolve 90% of the issues with the inconsistencies between FE4 and FE5. If you make Reinhardt more prominent and more involved in the plot as well, since he's such a famous character, along with Ishtar and the gang, you'll have an easier transition for the villainous groups to coordinate with each other and adapt that child abducting storyline, which is one of the very strong points of Genealogy that isn't really fleshed out too well. I feel like sometimes it's fleshed out more in FE5 than it is in FE4. Combining these story aspects will be able to create a more cohesive storyline that can appease to the newer demographic of players. I don't think we should have an addition of an avatar of any sort, but if there is a place in which the avatar should be added, it honestly should be Generation 1. Because in Generation 1, you could then impact how you transition that first part into the second part, and maybe even have your child units or whatever be part of that brigade. Again, I do not advocate for this. I think adding an avatar to this is absolutely horrendous, but if it is to be added, I would prefer it in Generation 1. Another thing I want to talk about is that the return of the capture mechanic is long overdue, but maybe a more simplified process, kind of like in Fates. You can just capture them, take their stuff, drop them all in one shot. It might be better if it's either more streamlined or if the penalty or limit is involved in capturing so that you don't have to break it in order for it to be functional, but at the same time be consistent with what the story you're trying to tell. You're basically a rebel army going against a huge empire. Capturing enemy units should be a part of this. Ultimately, I do believe that if you look at only FE4 by itself and launch a remake of it, it will bomb. It will bomb because it doesn't have the necessary capabilities in order to be a game that can actually bring out a lot of new fans to the series or even characterize it in a good aspect. A lot of it's outdated and was the building blocks of what Fire Emblem is today. Not to be a hater on it, but the truth is the games have evolved since then. Although I think FE5 is one of the best in the series, it still has a lot of issues that really make it difficult for newer players to be able to accept. Namely, its difficulty in going in blind being absolutely brutal. But I do believe that FE5 is a better experience in all in terms of what it offers to the player and how the game plays out. It's also like a more traditional Fire Emblem, I want to say, which is why I prefer it, and if we were to launch a remake of FE4 and FE5 together, it would be a combination that would be benefited more if it emulated FE5's system more. FE5 also allows you to have a lot more tools to deal with issues, and the tools are a lot more fun in the forms of staves, scrolls, and so on and so forth. While FE4 just has the appearance of legendary weapons and it becomes kind of like a Juggernaut-y Awakening type style. Now this is dealer's choice. Some people really prefer that, some people really prefer the other. I honestly believe that the best system would be a combination of both, in which you can try to maintain that by segmenting the game into portions of horse gameplay versus foot gameplay, in which you have different tactics that you need to attack while going on. This also gives Leif, Seliph, and Sigurd the necessary spotlight that they need to have in order to be likable lords, and expands on a story that could really save the Fire Emblem franchise. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this could work out? Do you think my idea is good? Maybe a segmentation like Radiant Dawn would be the way to go. Or maybe not, because Radiant Dawn didn't perform that well in sales, so is this more tied to the fact that it's at the end of the Switch's lifeline? Or, I don't know. You let me know down in the comments below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe. The channel's doing great. I'm really happy with everything that's been going on. You guys, thank you so much for the support. Have a good one.